Hello, parishioners. It's time for Sunday School Bonanza, This Week in Mormons production, bringing you a gospel doctrine lesson and doing it with aplomb. So we hope we'll see what happens. We're joined once again by the indomitable Bill Doolittle.
Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Bill.
I'm just over here, not dominable.
Not dominable.
Nope.
That's
I never
super.
would.
That's great. We're happy to have you, though.
And I'm happy to be here.
Love having Bill. He brings a certain spirit into the room. The spirit of the Wendy's Frosty.
Every time.
It's beautiful. Lesson 36 is the one we're dealing with here in the Old Testament. The glory of Zion will be a defense, but don't be confused about that title. We are getting into Isaiah, everyone, and you get to, and we'll be treading in Isaiah for a number of lessons now. Actually,
Quite a few weeks.
Yeah,
he gets a lot of attention, as he
so
should.
Why do we give so much attention to Isaiah?
Well,
I mean,
there's a lot of reasons.
There's a lot of Isaiah.
Yeah,
that's fair. But even outside of that, there are books that are longer.
There are, and there are other books that have more content. They talk about a lot more history, but Isaiah does talk about a lot of stuff. I think it's because every other prophet we know is telling us to do it, and that includes the Savior himself, right? So the Savior quoted Isaiah all the time, encouraged people in the Book of Mormon, right? When he visits them, he encourages them to look into the writings of Isaiah, because for those people, right, Isaiah was not, he's now a prophet from a foreign land from a long time ago. So they needed that encouragement. And then Nephi, right, when he comes out and he's putting together what matters, he just dumps it right in. He says, look, this is important stuff. So everyone seems to think Isaiah's important, and they're not crazy. They're right about that, right? Because he's, as we know, the main thing that people run into when they're trying to read Isaiah is, man, I don't know what he's talking about, because he's talking about four things at once. But one of the things he's talking about is our time specifically. He's telling us stuff we need to know right now. So it applies, and most of what he says has resonance for our time and for our discipleship that we need. So I think that's why everybody encourages us to get into him.
Yeah, and it can be dense. Isaiah can seem extremely opaque.
Yeah.
And I think there are a number of approaches one can take. I think really the best thing you can do with Isaiah is you just have to stick at it. Like you have to be willing to sit down, not rush yourself and read for the sake of getting the reading done, but actually going through, studying. I find to be of great use to even get one of the Institute manuals or any other accompanying piece like that, and actually letting that supplement you as you are reading through passages to fully understand it. And then when you also get to that point in 2nd Nephi, you won't feel like you're getting held up. And you mentioned before, Bill, as well, that, and then after the Isaiah chapters of 2nd Nephi, a lot of what Nephi does after that is actually explaining everything he's just cited.
Yeah, he talks about having the spirit of prophecy and how important it is to have the spirit of prophecy when you're reading Isaiah. And that's kind of a high demand for us, right? You can't just turn that on, but it's a requirement. If you're going to understand it, Nephi talks about teaching his people the things of the Jews, about trying to help them understand these important prophecies in Isaiah. But one of the things he says, you have to have the spirit of prophecy. You have to be thinking about what Isaiah is saying with a certain end. And that's, there was a great talk that you and I were talking about earlier, or it was a section of it that got put in the Ensign in 2002. Do you have the date on that so we can give it to people?
Yeah, this one by President Eyring?
Yes.
Or then Elder Eyring. This was from
January 2002?
January 2002 in the Ensign, yeah.
And it's called Studying and Teaching the Old Testament.
Which you can imagine was 3 cycles ago for Gospel Doctrine.
So it was right. They put it in the Ensign just as we were going into the Old Testament 3 cycles ago. So so President Eyring talks about this, about how you have to have that spirit of prophecy, like Nephi said, and you have to try to understand the things of the Jews. But specifically on the spirit of prophecy, he talks about thinking more about the Savior. There are like 4 points that he shares, and that's what you have to do for Isaiah.
Exactly. So it's very easy. It says it right there, because it's very easy to get lost in Old Testament in general, in the great stories, customs. There's a lot of historical interest in the Old Testament. And I think a lot of that's very valuable, because the better you understand that in that context, the more it helps you really understand the narrative that's being presented to you. But like President Eyring says, he says, quote, I can make you a promise that if you do that, and he says, thinking about the Savior, the Spirit will come and you will sense less of the sordid wickedness of the people, of their abominations, and more of the love of their God, who warned them against iniquity and idolatry, who begged them to come to him, and who even in their wickedness and misery kept reaching after them. And that's a key thing to remember, is that it's very easy to categorize the Old Testament as just a God of wrath in many ways. But you forget that Jehovah is extremely patient with Israel, despite what we often think. And Isaiah provides great commentary on that and understanding what's going to befall Israel in that moment. And of course, like you said, what's going to befall us if we're not careful.
Yeah.
And if you want some of that context, just so we understand it. So Isaiah lived roughly 8th century BC is what we understand.
8th into 7th.
So 8th into 7th, which would be 700-ish BC into 600-ish BC. And I like thinking of that because that puts him right around the time. Of course, the northern kingdom's gone already by this point.
It gets wiped out, I think, during his time.
Northern kingdom's gone. He's from Judah. He's hanging out in Judah doing his thing. And that's when his ministry takes place. And it's really very quickly after that when you actually have the Assyrians come in and sack the southern kingdom. And because Jeremiah comes after Isaiah. Yeah. And if you know your Book of Mormon history, Jeremiah was a contemporary of Lehi.
Right.
And so when I think about that, it really helps me realize how immediate the teachings of Isaiah were for Lehi and his family. I mean, this wasn't some far-off doctrine from Enoch or anything like that. You're talking a prophet who in their mind lived, within 100 years-ish of their time.
Who was a witness to the last destruction of the northern kingdom and who was immediately prophesying something that at the time he prophesied it was crazy, which was that this small nation to the east, Babylon, would come take them, and nobody thought that was going to happen, but they were watching it happen. So this was a guy whose prophecy was coming true to them in a major way right at the time that they were getting ready to escape that destruction of Jerusalem.
And we also find in various other chapters, but just to get an idea, Isaiah was very good at the object lesson and in like very, very deliberately demonstrating the actual things that would be happening to Judah if they didn't get their act together. I mean, is it chapter 20?
In chapter 20, it's where the Lord, you can. This is good enough in the KJV to just read. So,
read it.
And at the same time spake the Lord by Isaiah the son of Amos, saying, Go and loose the sackcloth from off thy loins, and put off thy shoe from thy foot. And he did so, walking naked and barefoot. And the Lord said, Like as my servant Isaiah hath walked naked and barefoot 3 years for a sign and wonder upon Egypt and upon Ethiopia, so shall, and to paraphrase, Assyria do to Egypt. Basically, it's like this is what's going to happen to you. Now, it's less funny if you look in the footnotes, because in the footnote it just says that when he says naked, it means without an upper garment, like a slave or exile. But he's still walking around in this sort of shamed way
for 3 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, I think we got your point.
All to demonstrate to Israel, see what I'm like?
Yeah.
This is what will happen to you if
coming.
you do not get your act together.
Yeah.
And you see there are numerous examples of that. I mean, yeah, we were talking before we thought it was Isaiah, but anyway, Hosea later on marries a prostitute as an object lesson. So that's a fun one we'll get to at some point.
Ugh.
Don't know if that'll be in the manual or not.
Yeah, my money says no.
We'll find out. To deal with some of the things, you're going to be in Isaiah. This is Isaiah chapters 1 through 6 when we're getting into it.
Yep.
Very straightforward things. And the lesson, of course, calls for us to go through some of the things that the Israelites have done and how that plays out in our day. It's very straightforward. Chances are your teacher might have you, just read through some of these verses throughout these chapters and notice the things and how they affect the Israelites and how they can affect us. And I do like that, though. Isaiah serves so much as a warning to us. Like it says in 1, 3 through 5, the ox knoweth his owner, and the ass his master's crib. But Israel doth not know, my people doth not consider. Ah, sinful nation, a people laden with iniquity, a seed of evildoers, children that are corrupters. They have forsaken the Lord. They have provoked the Holy One of Israel unto anger. They are gone away backward. Why should ye be stricken any more? Ye will revolt more and more. The whole head is sick, and the whole heart faint. And that alone right there reminds us that Israel did this, but that we too can rebel against the Lord. And you can see even in latter-day history plenty of examples of open rebellion against the Lord. You can see even today in history of open rebellion against the Lord.
It happens.
Masked in any number of, it's couched in any number of terms or what's going on, but it's rebellion against the Lord.
And it comes out in a number of different ways that Isaiah points out. And really these first chapters, the first 5 chapters are a diagnosis of what's going wrong in Israel. And chapter 6 tells us the story of Isaiah's call as a prophet.
Yeah.
And so in the 5 chapters, he's really diagnosing there's materialism, there's the fact that they've turned their back on the poor.
Crisping pins.
The Wimples.
Yeah.
And which I thought was the follow-on band to the Wiggles. Are they a thing? Isn't that a thing?
Or the Wuzzle. It's very...
The Wuzzles.
It
sounds like a kid's band.
Yeah,
the Wimples.
Lazy
Anyway,
Town,
the crisping
sure.
pins, the round tires like the moon. So there's all this materialism, and Isaiah just says all of that materialism, all of those materials, all that wealth is going to be wiped away in this coming captivity. He talks about turning their backs on the poor. That's going to come back and get them. He talks about turning away from the Lord specifically, right, which we saw was the cause of the downfall of the northern kingdom and would eventually be the downfall of the southern kingdom, which is mingling with the neighboring religions, diluting the faith in the one true God to sort of whatever happens to be around.
Yeah.
And
which happens all the time to the Israelites, by the way. As early as when they initially settle Canaan, they have a problem with absorbing beliefs of their neighbors. So that's always there.
And that's something that we all struggle with, right? We all adopt sort of the morality of the societies in which we live to a greater and lesser extent, and when that conflicts with the gospel, Canada, right? Yeah. So anyway, they have all of these different problems, and in discussing them, Isaiah raises another big theme that is going to come up. He talks about, actually 2 other big themes. One is he tells you, look, you guys are all going to get wiped out. I'm sorry, I just have to tell you this. And he goes so far as to name his son Maher-shalal-hash-baz, which the Lord tells him to.
Brushed up on your Hebrew on your little trip.
Well, if there are any Hebrew speakers on there, I bet they'll disagree with you. Okay. But anyway, I hope that sounded Mesher Halal. Is that good? Did that sound convincing?
You sound like you're speaking Parseltongue.
Yeah, okay. So Maher-shalal-hash-baz, which is a reference to the hastening of the prey and to speed. It says to speed up the spoil, he hasteneth the prey. In other words, the Lord is bringing on this destruction to get to the gathering. Right, to just hasten the eventual gathering. Yeah. So that gathering shows up in these first few chapters, and it is already tied to the eventual millennial judgment. Right, if you look in chapter 2, he talks about that. He talks about how eventually there will be a judgment following the second gathering that we know we are a part of now, and he talks about the eventual redemption of Israel. In the run-up to chapter 6 where he talks about his call. So really you're getting a very short summary of everything Isaiah is going to talk about. Yeah. Israel's sin, the coming destruction, their gathering, then, a long period of time, then the other gathering, the big gathering, the judgment and the redemption of Israel, and then it's over. So he kind of lays it all out for you in 5 chapters.
It's all right there.
It's all there.
So Bill has done a good job explaining a very complex passage of chapters in a very good way. I think, not a Cliff Note way, but an accessible way.
I hope it was.
It's useful, yeah. And so the key here, folks, is to read this and understand it for yourself so that you can truly see all those things. I mean, and footnotes are one of your best friends, I think, also when you're cruising through the Old Testament doing this stuff with Isaiah. Because the other things in this lesson, that's why we wanted to talk about what we did today. The other things in this lesson, I don't want to reduce it to just the typical answers and typical questions that can be asked. But yeah, the stuff you're going to have things like, where are holy places where we can take refuge?
Yeah.
And what's your answer going to be other than my house, if I so see fit, the temple, church, anywhere where I have the Spirit with me and make an area that's conducive to the Spirit, right? Those things are great. So those answers are fine. They're extremely useful, and I think they're a great reminder because it's very easy, I think, no matter how pious we think we are, to not necessarily do enough to actually create holy places around us. So that's a fair reminder. I mean, there's a reason the brethren always encourage us to have a picture of the temple in our home, to do things that will invite the Spirit in, because they're clearly concerned that we don't do enough in our day-to-day to have just a holier place around us. So that's totally fair, and everyone should consider those things. But don't let that be the only thing you get out of Isaiah. Think about the fact that a lot of it has to do with gatherings and judgments and the finality, really, of this great, I don't want to call it an experiment because God knows the outcome, but this great experience we're having here on this earth. And the Lord has planned this out from the beginning, and He's had prophets from even before Isaiah, but few do so in such a rewarding way, I think, as Isaiah, to really understand things. But we have to earn it. That's the beauty of Isaiah. Nothing gained, nothing earned. You got to make it happen.
And I think that's the, as we are sort of wrapping up our intro here in the first section of Isaiah, if you're getting into it and you're starting to get discouraged, this is the time to take courage and do the things that President Eyring taught. One of the bullet points in that lesson or that talk that is in the January 2002 Ensign is that we have to be willing to be taught. And I think that's an important reminder as we get into Isaiah. Like, you're going to have to learn some of the things of the Jews. You're going to have to learn some geography. You're going to have to learn some history. But as you do, the stories in Isaiah really will come to life for you. And it is certainly not the case that the writing of Isaiah is inaccessible if you're willing to make an effort. And you really can. It's an incredibly exciting time in the history of Israel, and there's a lot going on. It's super relevant to our day, and so it's worth the investment. We're commanded by the Savior to study the writings of Isaiah, and for good reason. So if you're just getting started and you're like, I don't know if I'm going to do it, just do it. Just get through it, and you'll be grateful you did.
Yeah, I think that's our challenge to you. If you're make that a thing this year, actually study Isaiah. Don't just breeze through it and sit in the back and just say, like, I just can't wait till we get past these lessons so we can talk about Malachi, because I know all about robbing God. Let's take the time and actually make it happen.
It's only 66 chapters. You can do it.
Don't get discouraged, everybody. Bill, thanks for joining us this week once again.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Lovely to have you. Great times all around, folks. You know where to find us: iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, all those things. Subscribe, share, all that stuff. Send us an email, contact@thisweekinmormons.com, and visit us on the web at thisweekinmormons.com, and visit us on social media. We have a great, robust Facebook and Twitter community that you can be a part of. And get this, we're actually pretty good about responding to emails and messages. We take a personal approach because we can. I'll even if you have a message for Bill, too, he'll get it. I'll get it to him.
I'd love
Bill,
to hear
do you
it.
want me to get you the email address of bill@thisweekinmormons.com? I can
Let's
get
do
you
it.
your own if you need one.
Oh, man.
Okay.
I've arrived.
Maybe we'll do that. All right. Sounds good. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We hope you have a great Sabbath. This is, once again, Lesson 36. The glory of Zion will be a defense. This is Sunday School Bonanza, a This Week in Mormons production.